It's Jacob again. I wanted to do a video on an aspect of a thing that I may have referenced in my video, my spiritual evolutionary journey, where I caught you up with where I'm at in life and everything like that. But I kind of want to go into a little more depth as to one of the aspects of of what I mentioned in that video, and hence the title "Coming Out of the Closet." Um, but yeah, I forget when the actual National Coming Out Day is. I literally feel like that as of maybe say like 2 3 weeks ago, I decided to on Facebook and now to you guys coming out as a Christian agnostic. Now, I'm not one for labels and everything, but the only way that I could legitimately come out is to just, for right now, just give myself a label. Because there's no other way around it other than to just say what it is as far as labeling terms go. Um, Now, for those of you who don't know what a Christian agnostic is, it's someone who believes in the existence of a God, a higher power, um, but I wouldn't go so far as to say disagrees with what God's word says and everything, but just kind of has a hard time with some things and finds himself or herself wrestling with those certain issues and topics. And I believe strongly that there's a difference between disagreeing with something and then wrestling with it. There is a difference there. Um, and coming out as this was very very hard for me because um, I grew up in a very conservative religious Christian home. Um, and back then, I didn't really have a wide I don't have a wide open mindedness that I have now. Um, and I only thought that there was only one form of Christianity, and that was Christianity, and that it didn't matter whether you were a Baptist or a Catholic or whatever, that we belong to the same God, and that I had to associate myself with those people, and everybody else outside of that are just basically people who do exist, but they aren't people to befriend or anything like that. Now, I don't know if that was intentionally what I was or whatever, but I don't know. I feel like I just somehow naturally just had that vibe um, of of how to perceive the world back then. And also back then, my relationship with God was not really even a relationship. It was more just dead religion. Um, and But then as I got older, I started to get exposed to the fact that there are not only different types of Christianity, but but just different concepts of God and everything. And throughout my life, there have been different signs that I have gone through and experienced that have brought me to where I'm at right now in life, where I'm a Christian agnostic, is elements from used to being somebody who witnessed in downtown Portland, and we did our formal witnessing, but then whether it was in the same exact area or somewhere else around the world, you hear people who are doing exactly what you're doing, but they're doing it in a very different way. And the kicker is that they profess to believe in the same God just as much as we do. So that kind of got me a little bit. Um, that kind of got me a little bit intrigued as far as to try to find out. Find sorry, I'm still kind of tired waking up. It just kind of got me to really try to understand, um, you know, what the mind goes through um, with us humans, especially when it comes to those of us who believe in God. Um, and then there were other sides as well, like, having extended family and some members of that family, whether it's on my mom's side or dad's side, and their differing concepts of God and that they believe in everything. Um, and recently also, well, finding out different people and what they believe and everything like that. In fact, one of the one of the people that I am intrigued by, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that I agree with everything that he says, but I do agree with some of what he says. Um, and he's an agnostic atheist. Before I continue with describing this fellow, I will in a bit give an interesting view of what I believe to agnostics and atheists. But anyway, back to this guy. So the guy's name is Ricky Gervais. He's an international comedian who is an atheist. Um, and what's really interesting is that even though he said that it wasn't his intent, but at the same time, he also isn't going to apologize for standing up for what he believes in, which I'm all for. But what's interesting is he said the following. He said, "Just because you're offended by something, regardless of what it is, doesn't always necessarily mean that you're right." And that it really got me because a lot of times when we are offended by something, um, a lot of times we want to lash out and say you had no right to say that, I'm offended. Um, but it all depends on what was said. Like if he crossed the line and it was a line that should have been crossed, then yeah, that's something where he would be in the wrong and you'd be in the right. However, there would be some things where you would be offended, but depending on um, depending on what was said, you could be offended and you'd be right and he'd be wrong, or you'd be offended and you actually are the one that's wrong and he's right. And if ever that happens, then you have to make the choice of, okay, do I want to detach myself from my ego and try to be open-minded about this and try to see where he's coming from, or do I want to remain attached to my ego, assume that I'm always in the right, and put this guy down? you know and so just that kind of human behavior and human psychology and the brain and everything, also going off of saying that the Bible is evidence enough. Um and and then that number seven is someone who knows for absolute certainty that there is no God, the atheist. But what a lot of people don't realize is that numbers 2 through 6 are what I like to refer to as the middlemen, the agnostics. And this was another point that actually Ricky Gervais made, and I believe this one was on Stephen Colbert, where he debated the existence of God with him. And at one point, he said that and probably I don't know exactly how he said it, but basically the point, it doesn't matter whether you're atheist or agnostic, um, Buddhist or Hindu, everyone is technically agnostic. There's not one person who knows everything and anything about the concept of God and everything surrounding him and everything. There's always going to be that gray area of unknown where we'll know some things, but we won't know everything. And there are some people who, when there isn't anything if there isn't anything that they don't know, they are disappointed by that because they want to know everything. But here's what I find interesting, and this is what I have discovered in doing research. If one were to know everything and anything about God, there wouldn't be any need for God. Think about it. If we knew everything about God and all of his glory and all his impossibility and the fact that he's a double label God, one who's merciful and loving and compassion, but also has that wanting to discipline um, his children, won't stand for injustice or anything like that. Um, uh, you it's one of those things where it kind of just makes you kind of go, life wouldn't really be fun if we knew everything and anything. Like, it's actually fun to not know everything because it creates that adventure, that conquest of searching for knowledge, for wisdom. Um, but coming out of the closet as a Christian agnostic. So again, with the line graph. So I'm probably at a 2 or 3 um, where again, going off the definition, I lost my lost my device there. Um, where I do believe that God does exist. Um, there are just certain elements surrounding God and everything that, again, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that I don't believe it, but I'm just, having a hard time wrestling with, certain aspects. Um, and that's a Christian agnostic. But then you can have someone like a 5 or 6 who is an atheist, is convinced of their atheism, but at the same time, they are open minded to be proven wrong and to always want to follow the evidence. Because here's the thing: a lot of Christians, especially Christians that I grew up with in my church and school, because I went to a church school growing up, um, a lot of Christians assume that all atheists are prideful, that it's doom and gloom for them, that you know they pretty much are adamant that there's no God, and they basically spend their life and passion proving that and everything. But what a lot of Christians should discover is that not all atheists are like that. There are atheists that are like that, but there are also atheists that, while they do believe that there is no God, they're not as prideful as others. They aren't as closed-minded. You know, um, um, it's one of those things where you kind of have to detach your ego from the situations and really listen. That's why I feel like whenever I come across a Christian, why it's a love-hate relationship for me, because I never know who I'm going to get. I don't know if I'm going to come across a Christian, whether I know them or not, as someone who's like me, where they get it and they you know are being examples of true love to people because they love themselves first, or if they're the kind of Christian that listens until someone says something that is quote unquote controversial, it cuts him off at the pass and looks to try to convert the soul so that he can avoid eternal damnation in hell. You know? And depending on the situation, I'll either stay in the conversation or I will walk away. And it's one of those things where, all these different signs that that I have experienced and that I've come to, um, that it's basically been they've been moments where just voices in my head would just be like, Jacob, I don't know if you're getting this, but based on these experiences that you've been having, light bulb, ding ding ding, this is who you are, embrace it. um and then there just came a day where I was just like, fuck this. I'm I hate using labels, but the only way that I can come out properly is just this once use a label. I am a Christian agnostic, you know, and honestly, it's one of the best decisions I ever made, because um, before I came out, I was kind of trying to figure out if I should or not, but then also, going back on my journey, but then also reflecting on um, different family members who have different concepts of God, from mom to my dad to um, my stepmom to her kids to my aunts, my uncles, to my grandparents, hell, even my um, grandpa Bob, may rest in peace in paradise. Um, all these different people, just family and friends, who believed in God, but had different concepts of God, um, is is something that that just definitely intrigued me. Um, so yeah, I would close this video now, but and I would, but literally, I'm just really passionate about this, and to kind of show you guys a bit of where of kind of where I'm at in life. I want to show you all a video. Um, this is a video. First of all, the channel is Enlighten. It's a spiritual channel, and the guy, I believe his name is Westcott Loudon. This guy is literally, just amazing at comparing and contrasting and allowing one to be open-minded, regardless of whether you grew up religious or spiritual, or if you're not either, but this is something that really makes you tick. I would highly sorry, I dropped my thing again. Either wherever you're at in the spectrum of belief and faith when it comes to the concept of God, I'd highly recommend this channel. But the video that I want to show you is it's entitled One God in Many Forms. And it has different images that God could take. He could take the form of Jesus of Christianity. He could take Siddhartha Gautama, aka Buddha, from Buddhism. He could take the form of Lord Krishna from Hinduism. Hell, if he wanted to, he could even take on Allah from Muslim. Now, right here, before I show you, I just want to tell you that, if you're a Christian, or quote unquote Christian, who hears this or sees the image and you are instantly closed-minded right off the bat, then this video is not for you. This video is only for people who are willing to grow and evolve in their spiritual journey, even if it means exploring things that are controversial. And the old me would feel ashamed of this. I feel no shame. I have felt no shame since coming out as a Christian agnostic. It's a very good thing. So I'm going to play this video, and I'm turning because I'm going to show it to TV. So I'm going to share with you this video, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. This is the second time I've watched this now with you guys. But yeah, so here we go. Okay.
In this video, I wanted to approach the book, The Perennial Philosophy, written by Aldous Huxley. And I've started to make my way through this novel, and I decided that I would share with you guys some of the insights I've gained from reading this book. So in this video, I'm going to be approaching Chapter 1, Thou Art Thou, and exploring the significance of God as a transcendent idea which spreads out all over the world through various cultures and various spiritual motifs. Stay tuned. So in the book, What is Hinduism? We read, the center of Hinduism is the absolute, timeless, formless, spaceless God who manifests as pure consciousness and as the most perfect form conceivable. The primal soul, the first being, he radiates out from that form as a myriad of gods and goddesses. It is one God in many forms. So in Hinduism, they believe that there is one supreme being who manifests or reveals himself through an infinite number of forms. Now, perhaps you might be a Christian and thinking, what a load of rubbish, God through many forms. Well, let me introduce you to the word Elohim. Elohim is a Hebrew word that we see in the Bible quite often. It's one of the most commonly used words to describe God. And most of the time, we see it translated as just simply God. For example, in Genesis 1, verse 27, we read, so God created man in his own image. But this could just as easily be read as, so Elohim created man in his own image. You see, the word here in Hebrew is Elohim. But the interesting thing about Elohim is that Elohim is plural. It doesn't really mean gods so much as it means gods. Now, I once heard a Jewish teacher speak on this, and he said, we believe that the reason why God is plural is because ultimately the one God manifests himself through the infinite forces of nature. One God through many forms. We could also consider the fact that in the Old Testament, there's this ambiguity between God and angels. For instance, in the book of Acts, verse 35 of chapter 7, we read that St. Stephen describes the God who appears to Moses in the burning bush as an angel. He says, through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. But if we read from the story of Exodus, we hear no mention of an angel in that scene. Rather, it simply describes the Lord, the God of Israel, being in that bush. So there's this interesting ambiguity between angels and God within the Old Testament. And this seems to be revealing of the fact that the ancient Hebrews understood the angels as messengers, right? They understood the angels as messengers of the divine will. And we see the images of these angels as having the bodies of men and heads of animals, which, interestingly enough, is very, very similar to the images we see of pagan deities. So you see, the Hebrews don't seem to have gotten rid of these pagan gods. Rather, they seem to have demoted them or given them a place in their pantheon in which they no longer are considered gods, but rather are considered simply messengers of the one supreme God, one God through many forms. Now, what about the suggestion that God is consciousness? Well, in one of my other videos, The Problem I Have with God, I talk about this, and I explain how the Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, and ruach is usually translated as spirit or air or wind. And Hebrews understood air to be representative of consciousness because when we stop breathing, we lose consciousness. So many ancient people made this connection between wind, air, and breath and consciousness. So we read in John chapter 4, verse 24, Jesus clearly states that God is spirit. God is ruach. God is consciousness. Now, if God is consciousness, then that means that God lives inside of each and every one of us. God is the life, the spirit, the consciousness and vitality which sustains the world. If we look to Hinduism, we're introduced to the concept of the Atman. The Atman is the self or soul, the fundamental I that lives in the heart of everyone. And Hindus believe that this foundation of the self is Brahman. The Atman is God. The center, the core of who you are is divine. In 1588, St. Teresa of Avila published The Interior Castle, which described the soul of a human being as a single and inseparable diamond composed of 7 mansions. And at the center of these mansions, as a person makes their way along the spiritual journey, working deeper and deeper within themselves, they will eventually arrive at the center of this castle, the castle of their soul, to discover God. William Law, a Church of England minister, wrote, "For this turning to the light and Spirit of God within thee is thy only true turning unto God. There is no other way of finding him, but in that place where he dwelleth in thee. For though God be everywhere present, yet he is only present to thee in the deepest and most central part of thy soul. Thy natural senses cannot possess God or unite thee to him. Nay, thy inward faculties of understanding, will, and memory can only reach after God. It cannot be the place of his habitation in thee." But there is a root or depth in thee of his habitation in thee, from whence all these faculties come forth, as lines from a centre, or as branches from the body of a tree. This depth is called the centre, the fund or bottom of the soul. This depth is the unity, the eternity. I had almost said the infinity of thy soul, for it is so infinite that nothing can satisfy it or give it any rest but the infinity of God. So we could ask the question, does God only dwell within, or is he also all around us? The truth is that he is both. He is all around us and he is within us. As the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart put it, the more God is in all things, the more he is outside of them. The more he is within, the more without. And I think what Meister Eckhart is describing here is the more that you realize God within yourself, the more you begin to see God everywhere else. The more you find God within your own heart, the more you won't be able to help seeing him in the hearts and eyes of everyone else. St. Mother Teresa in India often described how every time she would serve the poor, she was serving Christ. She could see Christ in their eyes. So by discovering God within ourselves, we ultimately discover God within everyone and within everything. In the Chandogya Upanishad, we hear the story of Svataku. Svataku studied under the scholars of India, and when he returned home, his father asked him, "Have you learned about that by which we hear the unhearable, by which we perceive that which cannot be perceived, and know what cannot be known?" Svataku answered him, "What is that instruction, sir?" And his father said, "Fetch me a fruit of the Nagrota tree." And the boy went and he got the fruit. His father then said, "Break it open." And the son broke the fruit open. And the father asked him, "What do you see?" And the son said, "I see seeds." And the father said, "Open one of them." So the boy broke open. The father asked again, "What do you see, my son?" And the son said, "Nothing at all." And the father says, "My son, that subtle essence, which you do not perceive there, of that very essence this great tree is born. Believe it, my son, that which the subtle essence in all that exists has itself. It is the true, it is the self, and you, Svataku, are it." So what Svataku's father is describing to his son here is that the great mystery of the Nagrota tree grows from this invisible mystery, this invisible and subtle mystery that hides in the center of the seed. We find a similar analogy described by Jesus when he says the kingdom of heaven is like unto a mustard seed, which a man plants in the field. And when the tree grows, all the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. And we also find Christ describing the kingdom of God by saying the kingdom of God is within you and all around you. The Indian sage Shankara once said, "The nature of this one reality must be known by one's own clear spiritual perception. It cannot be known through a teacher." Similarly, the form of the moon can only be known through one's own eyes. How can you see the moon through someone else's eyes? So this inner divine spark is only known through our own inner spiritual pursuit, or as the Mandukya Upanishad puts it, the only proof for God's existence is union with him. So we can only know God by really being united with him. And this is ultimately a revelation on why religion is so difficult to prove. Religion is something which can only be known within the subjective experience of the mind. It is not something that can be known through scientific or objective research, because God is ultimately the center, the nucleus, the source of consciousness. The Buddhist sage Yongchai Tishi wrote, "One nature, perfect and pervading, circulates in all natures. One reality, all comprehensive, contains within itself all realities. The one moon reflects itself wherever there is a sheet of water, and all the moons in all the pools reflected across the earth are embraced by this one moon. Similarly, the Dharma body of the Buddha enters into my own being, and my own being is found in union with his." St. Catherine of Genoa puts it thus, "In God is my being, my I, my strength, my bliss, my desire. But this I that I so often call, in truth I no longer know what the I is, or mine, or desire, or bliss, or goodness." Or again she says, "My me," that's to say myself, "is God. Nor do I recognize any other me, any other self, except for God himself. And my being is God, not by some participation, but by a true transformation of my whole being." Or as the Islamic sage Rumi put it, "I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God. We can even find this understanding of the one supreme Lord, the indweller of the heart, in Aboriginal and prehistoric belief systems. Among the Maori of New Zealand, there's the concept of the Toyora, an eternal divine spark that lives in everyone. Among the Oglala, Lakota Indians, the divine element is referred to as Sikan. And again, among the Naskapi Indians of Labrador, we have the ideas surrounding Mistapeo, my friend. These are all Aboriginal concepts that capture this idea of this divine indweller of the heart, this immortal, unchanging, infinite being who lives in the heart of everyone. Albeit many of these spiritual ideas will differ in their details or vary in the cultural forms through which they're expressed, the fundamental themes remain the same. There is one universal spirit within us all. He sustains all the world and is deserving of our honor and our praise. This one supreme being is the being behind all beings, the face behind every face, the life that sustains us all. And as always, thanks for watching.
Now, I would stop there, but actually watching this makes me think of another video. I'm going to put this back to me really quick. So I will comment on that in just a minute, but first I want to show you another video. If I can find it. Sorry, I'm turning away because my laptop is connected to my TV and my TV's this way, hence why I'm turning. I don't, let's see. Let me see. I want to try to. Maybe 1 minute. Maybe if I. No, this video is about the same length. Sorry, that's an ad. There was an ad there. So I don't want to. The video is 17 minutes long. I'm not gonna go that far. I do want to find. I'm trying to find the video where Jim Carrey is painting the image of Christ, because not only is the painting good, but what he found it. But what he says as it's going on is good. So I'm going to show you just this one clip, and then I will comment on both of these videos. Again, before I play this, watch this with an open mind. If your mind isn't open, this isn't for you. So
the energy that surrounds Jesus is electric. I don't know if Jesus is real. I don't know if he lived. I don't know what he means, but the paintings of Jesus are really my desire to convey Christ consciousness. I wanted you to have the feeling when you looked in his eyes that he was accepting of who you are. I wanted him to be able to stare at you and heal you from the painting. You can find every race in the face of Jesus. And I think that's how every race imagines Jesus. They imagine him as their own.
That's brilliant. It's funny, I get so stuck when I'm trying to choose colors, but when I just grab them, it's cool.
I don't know what painting teaches me. I know that it just frees me. Free from the future, free from the past, free from regret, free from worry.
okay, so that's pretty much the end of that. So I don't know about you, but when I watch these videos, in particular the first one that I showed you, I go, damn, like, drop the mic, drop it, like pipe bomb. It's totally amazing. Now, this is where my my old self and my new self come in and battle it out. Hence, where I'm coming out as a Christian agnostic. You hear um, the phrasing and the wordplay like that, to the point where you see different sages, whether they're Christian, whether they're Buddhist, whether they're Hindu, whether they're Indian, and you see all these different quotations um, on the concept of God. Um, it's really, really intriguing. Like, it really is. And again, I wouldn't go so far as to say that everything that you just heard I would believe. There are some things that I am questioning that intrigue me, that make me want to do more research and find out more. There are things that I definitely do agree with. What's interesting is that, for example, in that first video, he made a reference to the concept that the kingdom of God is within you. What's really interesting to me is that I rarely heard that. And when I was a child, evolving in my journey, which at the time wasn't really spirituality, it was just religion, um, I kept hearing the pastor say that no, the kingdom of God is not within you, the kingdom of God is upon you. As if to say that it's not what's in you that is the key. Um, it's the supernatural, it's the divine, it's what's outside of you that's the key, and what's in is bad. A lot of Christians hold on to that belief. There are others who believe, whether they're Christian or not, that it's what's outside is bad and what's inside is good. And this was another thing that I agreed with too, is that uh, God is not, he's not either or. He's not in, but he also isn't out there. He's both out and in. Um, and what's interesting is I feel like um, a lot of I feel like one of the reasons why there's a lot of religious discord in our world um, is that we don't want to detach ourselves from our ego. We want to be the one to make that change. Um, and actually, this actually makes me think of another video that I want to show you, and I will end with this. I was thinking I was going to end with the Jim Carrey one, but this one probably is one of my favorites, and it's actually by the same guy that I actually told you about, Ricky Gervais. Um, and I just kind of want to show you um, that that video. So yeah, hold on to your hats for this one. I will give you a little comment on that, and then I will end the video.
I think religion's greatest trick wasn't convincing some people that there was a God who was all powerful. It was convincing everyone else that you couldn't ridicule the idea. It's when you get them. I think there'd be more atheists and less faithful if you weren't allowed to teach anything, you weren't allowed to mention any gods or any beliefs or atheism, right, until they were 20. I think we see a different pattern. The human brain, when it's young, is a sponge. It has to be. It has to take in all the information. It has to trust
parents, its elders, to survive. Without question, don't touch the fire. Why not? Don't go near don't go near the wall. Don't touch that spider with the red dot. Don't touch that. Why not? Just don't. There is a God. What? There is a God. And if you're bad, you go to hell. Okay? And if that's constantly confirmed, like all the other things, wolves eat you, black widows kill you, fires burn you, if it's given that same level of credence and truth, you're never going to get over it. It's going to be a lot harder to undo that. I think the myths came up, often as a stopgap to knowledge until we find out more. The earth is flat, and now we've proven that. Okay, the earth's not flat, we were wrong. Okay? But that's not personal. You don't take that personally. It doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect your afterlife. And so they often want to hold on to that. Right? But only because of the way they've been conditioned. We know it's fun to tell children there's a Santa Claus. And there's fairies at the bottom of the garden. And all these cute things. It's cute till they're 7 or 8. If they're 34, it's a bit embarrassing socially. This is my son. What's he doing? He's looking for fairies. Is he? Okay, we better leave. If you're born in India, you're probably a Hindu. If you're born in America, you're probably a Christian. If you're born in Pakistan, you're probably a Muslim. That's a coincidence, isn't it? You're always born into the right God. Always. Isn't that lucky? I was born into the right God. All those others are going to hell. But I was born into the right religion. I'm going to heaven. It's strange that we hold on to these sort of medieval beliefs. Where did the universe come from? God made it. Which doesn't solve the problem for me. Because we straight away say, well, who made God? And if they say, well, he's always been around, well, let's just say the universe has then. Let's just cut out the middleman. It saves time. We're all born atheist, and then that gets changed or enhanced. I mean, there shouldn't even be a word for atheism. It shouldn't exist. Shouldn't need it. There's not a word for not believing in fairies. And if people didn't keep inventing these weird, impossible deities, we wouldn't have to go around denying them. It's a matter of degrees. If you go around feeling good because whatever life throws at you, it'll all be okay in heaven, that's great. Doesn't affect anyone. Fine. If you pray that you'll do well at work, and then you try hard and do well at work, and you believe it was the praying, fine. We know it wasn't. We know the praying was irrelevant. We know praying without actually doing anything doesn't do anything. Praying and then working towards something. Praying to me is like making a list. That's all it does. It may even motivate you. It may even, it's getting your thoughts clear. Thinking there's someone hearing you and changing stuff, that's something else. But again, still not harmful. But if you start doing crazy stuff, because God's telling you to, that affects me. I've got to stop here. And if someone goes around saying, and bad people go to hell, fine, doesn't affect me. If they go on saying there is a God and bad people go to hell, I'm going to help God send them to hell by stoning them to death. Whoa, he doesn't need your help. He's all powerful. Chill out. God's got this one. I think it's very important you challenge your own beliefs. I mean that's what science does really. It doesn't constantly try and prove itself right. It follows the evidence, whatever that is. In fact, it tries to prove itself wrong. It doesn't sulk. When science thinks something and then it discovers it was wrong, it doesn't sulk because it found that out too. It's the question I often get, that people say, well, you're an atheist. You're closed-minded. No, I'm not. You know, that's a strange thing to say. I think the opposite is true. I'm going to always follow the evidence, whatever that is. And they say things like, if someone proved to you God existed, would you believe? Well, of course I would, by definition. In fact, it would be the greatest scientific discovery of all time. Scientists would celebrate. They'd run round. At the moment, we have no evidence for the existence of any God or anything supernatural. Never have. Possibly never will. But who knows? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. When someone puts forward a jar of God, we test it for its godliness. And if we find there's anything godly in it, we'll write it down. I get asked questions like, well, what do you think it feels like when you're dead? And I always say, what did it feel like for the billions of years before you were born? Like that. And there's also this strange thing that I get from faithful people. Why don't you believe in God? Well, that's a very strange question. Why don't you believe in God? Well, you came up with it. Why would I? As to saying I don't know, well, if you're agnostic about God in all his glory and in all his impossibility, you've got to be the same about Santa. You have got to say, I don't know. I want to say to an agnostic, what's your best guess then? Go on, have a punt. In fact, I don't ask agnostic. I don't say to agnostics, is there a God? No one arrangement is more amazing than another. And it's sort of like they work backwards. Because this is what happened, this is what we think is perfection. So we try and... It's crazy, we've got two eyes. That's exactly why I put them. You know, these are brilliant. This is exactly... If I was making a person, I'd make it just like me. And it's hard not to think there was a will to it. But there wasn't.
You know the Mark Twain quote about, it's so great that I have ears here to hold up these things we have glasses, and these ears are just perfect for that.
Exactly, yeah.
And another Mark Twain...
What's particularly good about that, it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
Because he's being sarcastic about evolution.
Right.
But in a strange way, people should take the analogy of the glasses. Because we know those glasses were made for ears. Do you know what I mean? It's strange. We know that we did that, and no one would ever go, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
I just found these weird glasses on the floor, and they fit my ears. And that's what people can't get around, because they want to do that with everything. They want to do that with,
Yeah.
But wasn't it great when he made bees like pollen? That was a master stroke. I could just add flowers and bees. He went, no, I'm going to make them need each other. Brilliant.
So, a lot to say on that. First of all, what you just heard from him kind of gives you a taste of where I'm at as far as my agnostic side. First of all, twice he hinted at the Richard Dawkins line diagram. He didn't go into detail like I did, but he did say it in such a way that makes it clear that there is a difference between an agnostic and an atheist. They're similar, but they're also different. Hence why he's an agnostic atheist, I'm an agnostic Christian, right? What's also interesting is that there are some things that he said that, again, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I disagree, but I just find it interesting and intriguing and have to do more research in order to know where I stand on them. He does say some things, though, that are really, really interesting. In fact, some of what wasn't said in this video, but was said in another video that he did on Piers Morgan tonight, he explains the difference between religion and spirituality. One is a joy, a journey, a hope and need. Another is an organized body who uses it for power and corruption in many cases. Um, but what's really interesting about listening to a guy like this, regardless of whether it's, interviews that he's in regarding talking about religion and being an atheist and stuff like that, um, it literally makes you think that, in fact, actually, I'm going to go one better. At one point in the video, he mentions that, that I think that he said that there'd be more atheists than less faithful if you weren't allowed to mention any gods until they were 20. Now, I do agree with that we would see a different pattern. However, the same exact result can be said if you did it like this. You could either not mention any gods until they were 20, or you could, but you had to do more than just God in the Christian sense. You had to explore the concept of God in the Buddhist sense. You had to explore the concept of God in the Hindu sense. You either couldn't mention any gods, or you could, but you had to talk about more than just the Christian sense. And whichever one that one would decide to teach, the same exact result will be the same. Is that if they're when they're around the ages of 18 to 20, that would be when they would really know exactly what's going on to where they would make an informed decision on what they believe. Another thing I want to touch on, and this is actually probably one of the most key things that I'm touching on because it's actually applicable to me, is he was talking about how the human brain when it's young is a sponge, and that it has to be, and that it has to trust its elders. That was me from the time I was 5 or 6, which was the time that I accepted Jesus into my life, until I was probably, I want to say maybe when I was 21 or 22, because I was actually at a church, believe it or not, one Sunday, and I forget what the main topic was, but I do remember that the speaker was talking about the wrestling story, or not the wrestling story, the wrestling encounter that Jacob had with, some say a god, some say an angel. I just say that he just had a wrestling spiritual encounter. And what's interesting is that before that message, I had only known one meaning to my name, Jacob, meaning deceiver, from the Jacob Esau Bible story. But that day when I went to church and I listened to the message, I discovered a new meaning to my name, heel grabber. And as he continued on, I realized that all this time I had been living my life and believing what I am quote unquote supposed to believe about God through the lens of my parents, through the lens of my my superiors in the church, and that I couldn't question it, because if I did, that would mean that I would go from being found to lost again. Like, I had that spiritual awakening and I had that realization. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, never again am I going to be brainwashed into this. I'm going to, in a sense, commit spiritual rebellion. Not necessarily against God. I want to make that clear. It's not necessarily against God that I was that I was making the spiritual rebellion. It was against the different members of society in my life, whether that be my parents or my people saying, I love you, I want to continue to be friends and family with you, but I need to figure out my own shit, and I would hope that you would love me, respect me, and support me in this. If you are able to do that, great. If you're not able to, then I don't really give a shit, you know? And so it's one of those things where I had to, in order to figure out where I am to the point where I'm now coming out of the closet for like the second time as a Christian agnostic, um, I needed to temporarily remove myself from different equations. I needed to remove myself from family. I needed to remove myself from the church. I needed to remove myself from any and every social aspect of life in order to really get down to who I am and what's my place in the universe kind of thing. Videos that the three videos, well, actually I should say two and a half, two legitimate full videos and one clip. Those videos hopefully should give you a sense of where I'm at right now in life as a Christian agnostic. But also, I want this kind of to be a two-way street thing. I want to not only share these with you to show you where I'm at in life, but I also want to share these with you because I feel like we all can draw something from this too. And what's actually really interesting is, this is probably the last thing I'm going to mention, and then I will close. Another thing that he mentioned, and this is something that I'm really trying to figure out, is he mentioned that there is no scientific discovery for the existence of God. In fact, there's another version of this video where it actually gives like subtitles. And when he mentions that, it actually highlights and says that the Bible is not historical evidence for the existence of God. Again, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I disagree with that, but it does make me wonder because I have heard two speakers at my church, one of which actually just spoke last Sunday, and a couple of years ago, he was a full member of the church, but left to teach somewhere else. What's interesting is that both of them made scientific references. And one of the references, one guy mentioned that in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was praying to God, and as he was praying, he was sweating drops of blood. Now, what's interesting about that is that some people like think that, you know, he's God, he can do that. But what's actually interesting is that God, first of all, God became man, he became human, but what he went through was actually a scientific neurological thing that could happen to the body, which I had no idea, which makes me think, well, okay, if that's scientifically proven, if Jesus, who was God, who became man and human, if he could do that, then if ever I was in a situation where I was in that state of mind, I could probably do that. I mean, not to say that that would ever happen, but if I was ever in sort of that dire strait, then possibly maybe that could happen. Another scientific thing that some scientists have proven, in fact, this is the other pastor now that I'm talking about, he makes the scientific argument that that scientists have tested the crucifixion of Jesus. They have tested his, what happens to the body when one is crucified, when one's legs are intact and when one's are broken. And they both prove to be adequate. And what's interesting is that I've shown videos to this guy trying to get him to just kind of do more research and everything like that. I don't know if he has, but again, this is just to kind of give you a little bit of taste of where I'm at in life, as well as to hopefully get you guys to maybe see where you can relate and if this is applicable to you or not. But yeah, that's it for my video for coming out as a Christian agnostic. I would like to continue to have you guys love, respect, and support through this spiritual evolutionary journey that I'm on. I think maybe tomorrow, late morning, I think I might show you guys a video of one of the pastors who, in fact, the pastor I listened to last Sunday, I'm not, I probably won't be able to show you the actual message because it isn't up yet, but I probably, just to give you a sense of what I heard, um, I will probably look up his YouTube channel, Hope Generation, and I will try to find a video that I feel like will describe exactly what is going on and why I'm at where I'm at. So that's it for today. I gotta go now because I gotta do some things right now before I get ready for work. And yeah, so I will end this right here, and I will talk to you guys. I will talk to you guys hopefully tomorrow. Rum rum.